Yo, what's up, everyone? This is Terry with College Football Stop. Bring you another show today. Today's October 3rd. Can't believe it's October already, but October 3rd, 2023. I got a lot of stuff to get into today. Obviously, the main topic is Ryan Day still mad? Is he still in his head about his team being called not tough? We'll get into that here in a minute. The first thing I want to talk about is can Maryland upset Ohio State? That's the question. A lot of people have Ohio State on upset alert this week. I want to get into that and talk about how they possibly could, what would need to happen for them for Ohio State, and then uh, we'll go from there. So first, starting out, like I said, um, the question is, can Maryland beat Ohio State? The answer to the question, I think, is yes, but I also think that a lot of things would have to go their way, and Ohio State would really have to have a bad game, which coming off of a bye week, I don't necessarily expect that. But if you think about it, Maryland is an explosive team. Offensively, they have speed. They have guys um, who can take it to the house at any moment. And in the past, Ohio State has had some problems with that, with Maryland specifically. You look back to like 2018, Ohio State gave up like 300 rushing yards to one player on Maryland's team. I forget the guy's name. I should have looked that up, but anyway, they gave up almost 300 yards to that one running back. And then you look at last year, Tualia Tagovailoa was kind of tearing Ohio State up. They had the tight end that was kind of going off, who I believe is now starting for Alabama. I think his name's Delp, something like that. But yeah, I mean, again, in the past, Maryland has shown the ability to kind of go up top on Ohio State and have some huge plays that keep the game close. Now, the problem with that this year is typically when that does happen, it's when Ohio State is playing at Maryland, which the game is in Columbus this year. Typically, when the games are played in Columbus, it's usually a blowout in Ohio State's favor. So I kind of expect that to be what happens here. And also, if you factor in that Ohio State's defense this year is kind of centered around not giving up the big play. So basically, excuse me. So basically, in order for Maryland to beat Ohio State, they're going to have to execute, and just play better than Ohio State does for the entirety of the game, which I just don't see that happening. And I think that Ohio State has the ability this year against a team like Maryland, they can kind of hone in and focus on the run game and should be able to push them around a little bit. And then when you look at the defense, again, I think they have the speed, they have the talent on defense this year to where a team is not just going to get off on them the way that they have in the past. When I look at the defense, I always say I don't see a mark. And I mean, maybe you have like your linebackers and coverage as a mark. Okay, that's fine, but who are they going to be covering? They're going to be covering probably a tight end at best. And that's if you put a tight end in the right spot, they're going to be covering them. And then, I mean, is your tight end going to win the game for you? Probably not, especially versus a team like Ohio State. But another way that Maryland could win this game would be if Ohio State's offense is dysfunctional. Again, I've been on record this entire year saying that I think Ohio State's offense is going to lose the game for them. And when I say that, I mean I think that Ohio State's offense at some point this year is going to have a stinker game, which obviously they kind of did versus Notre Dame, but they put it together at the end and the offense was able to go out there and win the game. But until I see like them consistently executing on offense, I still kind of have the thought that there's going to be one stinker game where they score 17 points or less against a team that can actually score a little bit, and that's going to cost Ohio State a game. So again, do I think that's going to be this week? I don't. Not coming off a bye week and not against Maryland's defense, but I do still foresee that being something that happens at some point this year, and they might prove me wrong, and they might never do that. And I hope that's the case. I hope to see Kyle McCord keep progressing, keep becoming a better player, because obviously, with Ryan Day as your quarterback coach, you have high expectations, and I mean I think that Kyle can meet those. He's shown the ability to make some throws that he didn't show in the past. So as long as he keeps progressing, keeps getting more confident in himself, and that in turn helps Ryan Day get more confident in him, I think the offense is going to be fine, and I think that it'll be fine against this Maryland team. All right, so the next thing I wanted to get into here is the main topic of the show. So is Ryan Day still in his head about the toughness of his program? Um, Again, with the whole thing started because Josh Gaddis, who was the offensive coordinator, excuse me, slow down a little bit. He was the offensive coordinator at Michigan. Called Ohio State a soft team in after Michigan beat them in 2021, which whatever, you could think they were soft, you could think they were not soft. I mean, the defense was definitely not good, so we'll put it that way. Anytime your defense is terrible, you're going to be called soft. Look at like the way the Big 12 used to be, the way the Pac-12 is kind of looked at as soft teams because their defenses are not good tacklers and they're just not in the right spots. So however you want to say it. But anyway, Josh Gaddis said that Ohio State was soft. Ryan Day had a soft team. Josh Gaddis is now a wide receiver coach, I believe, or offensive coordinator, something like that, at Maryland. So, I mean, the game is going to be kind of personal to Ryan Day. But what I want to see is that going to be in Ryan Day's head and make him make choices and decisions on the offense that indicate that he's still in his head about it. When he's bringing out extra offensive linemen and extra tight ends when it's a short yardage situation, I hate to see that because it seems like we never get it. It seems like you're putting guys in a position who haven't been playing all games. So you're bringing out, let's say, Joe Royer and Luke Montgomery in that big package, and even G. Scott, depending on how much he's played in that game. You're bringing out guys who haven't been in the game, haven't been getting hit constantly, and you're like, oh, hey, we're going to line up 11 guys in front of you, and you guys need to make a hole for this running back. And I don't like that. I don't like the way that they do that just because it never works, for one. And two, it seems like an unnecessary step to try to prove that you're tough. Like, what I think that Ohio State really needs to do on those short yardage situations is spread it out a little bit, run two wide receivers or three wide receivers, and then you utilize the freaking read, man. I don't understand why we don't do it. If you need 1 yard and you have a guy like Kyle McCord who's tall, he's not a bad athlete. Like, no matter how you spin it, with the Kyle McCord and Devin Brown thing, Kyle McCord is not a bad athlete. He's shown the ability to juke a couple people and get at least a couple yards when he does run. I haven't really seen him. He's only been sacked, I think, like once this year. And again, I think we need to utilize that reading a player. So if you spread them out, you're already bringing at least let's say they have 4 guys that are out in coverage. That's 4 guys that are not going to be in the box. 4 guys that you don't have to block. And then you mix in reading a defender. That's another guy. That's 5 guys now that are taken away, and now you have a numbers advantage. But what Ohio State's doing right now, they're putting themselves at a disadvantage in numbers, and it's just simply not working. And I mean, when you're in those short yardage situations too, it kind of takes away your ability to double team and get to the next level. I don't know. I hate the way that Ohio State is not converting on like the big moments in games, and honestly, that's what has cost Ryan Day in his time at Ohio State and the games that he's lost. I mean, you can look back at basically any game that Ohio State lost and realize that they did poorly in those games on third down and in the red zone. So those are things that Ryan Day has to get fixed if he wants to continue bettering himself as a head coach. I think that he will. To answer the overall question, do I think that Ryan Day is still going to be in his head about it? I mean, he was last week, and then he came out in the public and spoke about it. So I don't know if maybe he's just more confident in his team now. But I think that Ryan Day really should just be focused on, he shouldn't be focused on that. That shouldn't be an issue for him because right now Ohio State has a tough ass fucking defense. So regardless of what a team is going to say about you or what they think about you, if your defense is going to go out there and punch them in the mouth, there's nothing that they're going to be able to do about it. They can't call you a soft team if they can't score 14 points on you, if they can't score 17 points on you. Look at Notre Dame. Ryan Day's team was being called soft by Lou Holtz prior to the game. A lot of other people, as much as people want to hate on Notre Dame now, there was a ton of people all over Twitter and all over media everywhere who were picking Notre Dame to win. and simply just saying that they were going to be the tougher team. They scored 14 points. I don't care how many yards they had. I don't care none of that. If you hold a team to 14 points, you have a really good chance to win that game, especially when you're Ryan fucking Day and your offense is supposed to be fantastic. So again, he should focus on the offense and do what he knows works. And with the defense, if they're playing the way that they're playing right now, you have a tough ass football team. There's no reason to even worry about anybody saying that you don't, because if that team's gonna think that you're soft and come in and can't put up points on you, fuck them. You're gonna win. It doesn't matter. All right, so I'm gonna move on from that. Again, I mean that's just a topic that gets me going a little bit because I think that Ryan Day is a phenomenal coach and has a chance to be one of the best in college football. And I think that it would mess with me in my head too if a coach called me soft or told me I was born on third base and then beat me 2 years in a row. I think that would be hard on anybody to deal with that. But at the same time, when something is hard, you have to deal with it. That's a problem that you have to solve, and that's up to Ryan Day to do that. What I was explaining there is what I think would be the best way to do that. All right, a couple more things here today. I have the next segment is going to be my breakout segment. I'm going to pick two players, one on offense, one on defense, who I think are going to break out throughout the rest of the season. Both of these guys that I have here are really good players that we've already seen make some plays, but I'm looking for them to step into a role where they become one of the best players on Ohio State's defense or on Ohio State's team, excuse me. Because right now, I wouldn't necessarily put either one of these guys in the top 8 to 10 range, but I think that both of them should be close to the top like 6 or 7 range by the end of the year. So, all right, let's get into that. The first guy I want to talk about is on offense, Carnell Tate. So Carnell Tate has got high praise from Marvin Harrison Jr. about how he's better than him when he started last year. Excuse me. I do think that Carnell Tate could have a big role on this team, especially when we get into some of the bigger games. I don't know if he didn't play against Notre Dame because of the confidence in him, or if Ohio State was just like knew that Notre Dame was really good and they wanted to really focus on the guys that they know exactly what they're getting from them. But I don't think Carnell Tate played at all. However, with some of the games coming up, I expect to see him on the field more often. And every time that he's been on the field, he's been making plays. I made a tweet or something, reached out to I made a tweet or told my homies that Carnell Tate, I think, has like 30 less receiving yards than Julian Fleming on like 9 less receptions so far this year. Now, and that's not a knock on Julian Fleming because he's just a different type of receiver. I mean, Julian Fleming is out there because he's doing the dirty work. He had a huge catch against Notre Dame for a first down to keep the game alive on 4th and 7. And also, he's the best blocker probably on the team in terms of anybody who's not on the offensive line. He's probably the best blocker on the team. But again, spinning that back to Carnell Tate, I think Carnell Tate brings that extra receiving threat to the field. He's probably a little bit better in terms of a receiving threat route runner than Julian Fleming. And I think that Ohio State needs to utilize that, especially in the games like the Notre Dame game, which I know they didn't. But when you have a team that's trying to take away your number one target, you got to go to number 2, which is the Mecca. If they take away number 2, you need that third guy to be there to make a huge play. Like I said, Julian Fleming did it, but I think Carnell Tate could do it more consistently. I expect to see him play more, and hopefully by the end of the year, he adds that threat that kind of makes this offense unstoppable. And then moving on to the next person here on defense, I have Sonny Styles. Now, this is what I said in the beginning. Some of these guys have already made an impact. Sonny Styles is one of those guys that has made an impact, but he hasn't necessarily had any like impact plays, except for against Notre Dame. Him and Latham were in on that stop on Sam Hartman on 4th down, which obviously that's a huge play. But I'm talking about like an interception, a forced fumble, a sack, something like that. I think you're going to see Sonny Styles start piling up some more statistics as the season goes on because he's been real close to some sacks. I haven't really seen him in coverage too much in terms of like them throwing the ball towards him. But we saw in the spring game, he blew up a couple passes. So I expect to see some big plays out of him, and I think that Sonny Styles stepping up into that like superstar status is what's going to take this defense to the next level with a defense that's already really good. All right, so that was it. That was my breakout players. Again, Sonny Styles and Carnell Tate. I'm expecting big years from them, even though we haven't seen a ton from them early in the season. Like I said, we've seen Sonny Styles more, but with the athlete that he is and the ability that he has, I think that he's going to make some plays in big games that people just don't see coming. Maybe like a sack, forced fumble, something like that. And we need that on this team because that's one thing that this team has been missing is playmakers on the defense. All right, so moving on, my last segment of the day here. I did my daily stat dig. I want to get into some stats every single day just because I am a stats guy. I've always been. And again, you can use stats to prove your point. A lot of people can flip them and come back at you with other stats that'll prove their point. It is what it is. I still like diving into them because it's fun. Whatever. I like to look at them. So I've seen a lot of Michigan fans on the timeline talking about Kyle McCord and JJ McCarthy about how they think JJ McCarthy's better. So what I did, I went back and looked at JJ McCarthy's first 4 games of last year because that was his first time as a starter. Now it's not Michigan's first 4 games; it's his first 4 games because if you remember right, last year they had a quarterback battle go into the season, and they played basically K McNamara for the first game and then JJ for the second game. And then JJ played every game after that. So I'm counting his first 4 games starting with the second game. JJ was 818 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. And then you compare that to Kyle McCord's first 4 games this year, which Kyle McCord is dealing with a couple of things different this year. He did have the quarterback battle thing going on, but I'm not going to give too much credit to that because Kyle McCord basically played all of every single game. The one game that Devin Brown actually got to get into the game, Kyle McCord played most of the game. I mean, it's whatever. I'm not going to even factor that in, but that is something that is happening. Also, the clock rules. The clock rules this year are a little bit different than last year, so that does impact it also. But looking at Kyle McCord, he's 1,055 yards, 6 touchdowns, 1 interception. So more yards, same touchdowns, 1 more interception, which even the interception came on a 4th down where he just had to throw it. Nobody was open. I don't know. Again, people compare J.J. McCarthy and Kyle McCord, J.J. McCarthy now to Kyle McCord right now, and I don't think that's fair. However, life is not fair, and if those two play this year, when those two play this year, I should say, they're not going to be at the same point in their career, and whoever's better could be the reason why the team wins or loses. So, again, either way, Kyle McCord had better stats than JJ in his first 4 games, in my opinion. But whatever, we'll see. Again, I'm not the one who's been touting high praises for Kyle McCord because I think he needs to get better. But I do think that he will get better, and I still think that his ceiling is higher than JJ McCarthy's because I don't necessarily see the progression from last year to this year with JJ that a lot of people were talking about. All right, and then moving on to the next stat I wanted to talk about here. I've been going through every single week and looking at the best running back duo in the Big Ten. This is something that was talked about a ton during the offseason because you have Michigan with a good duo, Penn State with a good duo, and Ohio State with a good duo. And a lot of people were saying Michigan easily has the best running back duo. Penn State fans were saying, yeah, right, we had 2,000-yard rushers. We have the best duo. And then Ohio State fans were just kind of like, we don't really know if our running backs are going to be that great or not. But let's dig into the stats and kind of see what it's looking like so far this year. So looking at Michigan, they have Blake Corum with 5.7 yards per carry, 9 touchdowns, and he has 425 total yards. Donovan Edwards, 3.3 yards per carry, 0 touchdowns, and 157 total yards. So some of these stats, I'm using yards per carry. I'm not going to factor in just somebody getting more carries, by doing the total because I think that a team like Michigan, they're going to run the ball more than a team like Ohio State. Penn State's probably going to run the ball more than a team like Ohio State too. So the way I like to look at it is yards per carry. Actually, and going forward, I won't even mention the total yards until the end when we get into the total stats. But again, 5.7 yards per carry, 9 touchdowns. The 9 touchdowns for Blake Corum is the most of any back on this list, which you have to respect. Blake Corum's a really good running back. I don't take anything away from that guy. I was one of the ones who thought Donovan Edwards was going to be better just because of his speed, but he doesn't see the field as good as Blake Corum does, and he doesn't cut as good as Blake Corum does. But that dude is fast as hell, and he could be a game changer in any game if he gets the ball in space. Now, moving on to Penn State. Penn State has Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton. I was super high on Nicholas Singleton coming into the year. I thought he would be the best running back in the Big Ten. Looking at their yards per carry, Katron Allen's 4.4, and he has 2 TDs. And then Nicholas Singleton's sitting at 3.8 yards per carry, but 6 touchdowns. Again, I mean, it really surprises me that their yards per carry are so low. I don't know what, I feel like those two are two of the best running backs in the Big Ten, but their yards per carry are not looking great, and they haven't played great competition, so I don't really know what's going on there. Hopefully, they'll continue getting better. I heard something about Katron Allen having an injury. I don't know if that's true, but it's definitely something to look into if you're a Penn State fan or an Ohio State fan wondering what's going on with their roster. And then Ohio State has Travion Henderson, 6.7 yards per carry, 5 touchdowns. The 6.7 yards per carry is the highest by any running back on the list here. I love to see that. I think Travion Henderson, I was saying that I think he would be the best back in the Big Ten because I was projecting from his freshman year. He didn't play last year as much as he should. He was injured, didn't practice. I was projecting for him to have a huge leap from last year to this year because he I just see that from Ohio State running backs, and the potential he had in his freshman year was crazy. I think that he didn't get to practice enough last year with his injury that he had, and I think that hindered some of his development. But I think he's getting that development as the year goes on because every game I feel like he's gotten better, and I feel like he still has the potential to be the best running back on the entire list. And then the second guy on Ohio State's team, Chip Trayanum, 5.8 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns. So Ohio State actually has the 2 highest yards per carry on this list at 6.7 and 5.8. The next closest was Blake Corum at 5.7. So, I mean, I don't know. To me, if you're looking at these stats, that's clear. Ohio State has the better running back duo right now. But the year is long. A lot of teams are going to get into better competition, and teams kind of show their true colors. Michigan gets into better competition. They stick to the run a little bit more. Penn State gets into better competition, and, they mix up things a little bit more, I should say. I don't know. But Ohio State's one of the teams who they get into the better competition, and they typically start to throw the ball more and kind of abandon the run. So let's hope that doesn't happen because right now their running back duo is looking really good. And just to kind of sum all that up and give you the average between the 2 running backs, this is not overall as a team, but just the stats that I mentioned. Michigan, those 2 backs are at 4.5 yards per carry with 9 touchdowns. Another thing I should say, too, that I kind of forgot to talk about here, Michigan and Penn State have played 5 games. Ohio State has played 4. So really the only stat on here that's going to be messed up with them playing more games, is potentially the touchdowns and then the total yards, which we'll get into here in a minute. So Michigan is 4.5 yards per carry, 9 touchdowns. Penn State, 4.1 yards per carry, 8 touchdowns. And Ohio State, between those 2 running backs, is at 6.25 yards per carry with 7 touchdowns. So, I mean, there's a clear difference between all 3 of these teams in terms of the yards per carry and the amount of touchdowns. Like I said, but Ohio State's played 1 less game, so that 7 touchdowns could easily be 9, and they could be tied for the most touchdowns in the Big Ten. And then, I mean, if their run game's bad, maybe their yards per carry could go down. It could also go up. So we'll see how that plays out. And then overall, if you're looking at like a total season number, right now, Blake Corum is leading all these running backs with 425 yards. And then the second one is Katron Allen with 307 yards. Travion with 295. Also, like I said, Travion Henderson's played 1 less game. So, I mean, looking at the highest running back. Travion Henderson's at 295. Blake Corum's at 425. I mean, it's not completely out of the question that after Ohio State plays their next game, that Travion Henderson could be over 425 yards. He would just have to have a huge game versus Maryland. And that all just depends on what Ohio State wants to do. Okay, so then moving on from that, again, that's just one thing that I like to cover every week because it was a hot topic, and I feel like as an Ohio State fan, a lot of people were saying that Ohio State doesn't even have a chance to have the best running backs in the Big Ten. And so far, the stats indicate that they probably do, but again, I know that as the season goes on, those things are going to be constantly moving up and down. All right, so then moving on to the last stat of the day here, and then we'll get out of here. I wanted to talk about Tualia Tagovailoa against Ohio State, what his stats have looked like. He's played against Ohio State 2 times, so last year and then in 2021. I'm not sure if he was on Maryland, the starter at Maryland in 2020, but that game got canceled, so whatever. There's no stats there. But looking at the last 2 years, last year he was 72% completion percentage, which that's really good. 293 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. I mean, that's a hell of a day for a quarterback, especially against a big-time team like Ohio State. And you'll see when we look back at 2021, his stats were not much different, except for he had two interceptions, which even in the game last year, he had a turnover. Wasn't counted as an interception, but Zach Harrison knocked the ball out of his hands late in the game, and Steel Chambers caught it for a touchdown. That probably could have been ruled an interception. But anyway, last year, 293, 0 interceptions, 2 TDs. And you look back at 2021, he also had a 72% completion percentage, 279 yards, 2 touchdowns, and also 2 interceptions to go along with it. So if you're looking at the difference in the games in terms of Tualia Tagovailoa's play, Ohio State in 2021 kind of blew Maryland out. In 2022, it was a really close game. I think it was a 6-point game with Maryland had the ball driving, and Ohio State intercepted it for a touchdown, which put the game to bed. But the biggest difference in those games was the 2 interceptions by Tualia Tagovailoa. I mean, I don't know. I mean, in the past, he was a guy who would turn the ball over more. But he's only getting older, he's only getting more mature, and he's just becoming a better player as he goes on. So I don't really expect him to turn the ball over too much. At the same time, Ohio State's defense this year is better at creating turnovers, and their secondary is better at being disruptive when the ball is in the air. Basically, he's averaging about 72% completion percentage, about 280 yards, 285 yards a game, and 2 touchdowns, with the potential to throw interceptions. This is the first test for Ohio State's secondary. I know that Notre Dame was supposed to be a test, but I'm going to just be honest. Notre Dame's wide receivers are not fast. They have the one guy who's fast. I think his name's Chris Tyree, but he had 1 catch, I think like 20-something yards, and that was it. He didn't get the ball again. I don't think that Notre Dame's wide receivers were able to challenge Ohio State's DBs on the outside. When you look at Denzel Burke and Davis Niganosin, especially Denzel Burke, he was kind of shut down. They were not even throwing his way. But I think that we see him get tested more this week. And this is kind of the game where we're going to find out if Denzel Burke is really about it and if he's going to be a first-round pick or if he maybe got the benefit of going against some not great receivers. I think that it's going to be the better option. I think that Denzel Burke is really about it this year. And I think that if they throw his way, bad things are going to happen. I could easily see this being a game where he ends up having like 2 interceptions, maybe a pick 6, something like that. And hopefully that's the case. We'll get into that a little bit later in the week with some like hot takes or like bold predictions. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up here. Thanks for watching. You guys have a great day.